It's all yours, Mike.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to California Free Radio, where we're trying to make you aware of what's wrong with California if you don't know already. And we're out to spread the word about all the things that not just can't be fixed, but can be fixed. I'm Mike Netter, accompanied every week, as I always am, by Scott Piotr. Kurt is off somewhere tonight. And tonight, I want to remind everybody this is live on @NetterMike on X or Twitter. You'll find me live on LinkedIn, live on our Facebook groups. Thanks to Stephanie and on Mike Netter. And everyone out there, help us share the show. Here's part of what we're talking about tonight. California has an accounting problem because apparently we can't count or account for where the money goes. And I think it's time in California we stepped up and started asking Gavin, where does it go? And maybe we invite people like Dojan to take a look at the state books. That's a little bit of what we're going to focus on tonight. Scott, what are some of the things you want to focus on?
Hey, we got $50 million of the state's tax money is going to go to high paid attorneys up to $2,000 oh, I'm sorry, that's DWP's attorney. That's $2,000 an hour. But we've got $50 million basically for lawfare against the Trump administration. If they do anything, or I should say, when they do things that California and Newsom don't like. So Rob Bonta, our pretend attorney general, is going to be in charge of that budget and able to sue everybody. We're talking sanctuary state stuff. We're talking about, fighting DEI. We're paying for illegal aliens defense to stay in the country. Separation of powers doesn't matter to these guys. They're in it for everything. They're doubling down in California.
And that's part of the problem we have, everybody out there. Let's take a hard look at some facts tonight. And I want to take a step back because we've focused a lot on the federal government in the so-called news. By the way, Scott, do you like my new on-air sign? I got it for my 68th on Monday. Thank you, Drew, very much. I almost look official, don't I? Kind of like the
happy birthday.
ABC studio. Thank you very much.
You still didn't know you were on the air until a couple seconds later. So
no, I know that. Well, I'm still
just that.
Doesn't make me any brighter, Scott. It just means I have a sign to remind me of things. When you get to be my age, you'll eventually figure that out. And you know what? We ought to get Gavin Newsom a sign that says doesn't work. Because here's part of the reality I want to make you very aware about the state of California. And we're going to get in deep on a little bit this tonight. But a couple basic facts. States cannot declare bankruptcy. States cannot print money. Love that, Dan. Okay?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. States don't print money. I'm going to say that again. So when you hear the federal government runs a $2 trillion a year deficit every year, which is an immediate question. Why are the Democrats against eliminating waste, both on the federal level and on the state level? Scott, can you try to tell me why that is?
Why
the Democrats are against? Apparently, they don't really want them to open. A great example.
Elon Musk, so you're talking about the feds and
the Democrats in general don't seem to want to look into the books, eliminate waste. California, for a number of years and still doesn't produce annual books. If you go online, you can call it the state budget, you can call it what you want. They have a proposed budget, but we don't see where our money goes until a couple of years later, just like Gavin lost the $24 billion for homeless. When it comes to the federal government, look, I'm not saying everybody, but Elon Musk, I don't know if you heard today, did something I find just hard and cold. And I really find it hard to believe that any human being would do that. But he cut off Social Security to a woman that was 136 years old. And that's just not right. Okay. And the Democrats, I could see why they would rant and rave against that, except that person doesn't exist. And why are the Democrats, and we know the answer to this, but I want to hear your answer to it, so against, quote, opening the books and taking a look underneath at where our money goes?
You know, it's funny because Doge, a la Elon, they got all these bright young guys, as the Dems like to refer to them. Those 22-year-old somebodies, we didn't elect those guys. Anyway, he's got some of the brightest minds in the world, and they're doing data mining. They're sending out their little AI bots, and they're going through the federal, in this case, the federal budget. I mean, you go into the Treasury. The judge didn't want them to do this, but they're actually going through like your checkbook and your check register, and they're going through the check register, and they're going, well, who is this guy, and what did they make this money out for? Why didn't they do that in California? We have Silicon Valley here. We could probably find that 24 billion that he lost on the homeless. Look at all the other things, the high-speed rail. We got what, $200 billion that we spent today, and we've got a little 400-yard piece of concrete that'll hold a future track to nowhere. I mean, we ought to be able to figure out where the money went and why. And then they're finding out that these guys aren't even. It's like you write a check and always in the little memo section. This is for rent. Okay, that's good. Well, the federal government's got a lot of checks. They didn't put that down. They didn't put a contract number down. They didn't put what the money was for. It just went to Mike Netter, or I should say, it went to.
Oh, I wish it went to Mike Netter, Scott. How optimistic you are.
It just went to Newsom, and we don't know where it went. It's a big black hole. And he's telling, hey, what's going on? We need to stop this.
And this is the problem that we have out there. And I want to really focus on this tonight because the hyperbole, and Sarah, you're right, it is so true because we don't know where our money goes. One thing we do know where our money goes is this. It goes a lot, and I think this is a lot of what happens in California, and on a bigger basis as you're seeing with whatever the U.S. aid organization is that they cut off. That frankly, Scott, I was barely cognizant even existed until the last 3 weeks.
But the Democrats are screaming like stuck pigs, so it must have been a big deal.
It goes to NGOs, and when you boil it, and by the way, for everyone out there who's wondering what the heck is an NGO. It's a new acronym for what's supposed to be used to call a nonprofit. Now, back in the day, and I'm saying back in the day because full disclosure, I turned 68, nonprofits were kind of a good thing. You had goodwill, save the animals, do this, I get it. But today, Gavin in California and throughout the country, we're pumping government money. And by the way, promise not to tell anybody out there, government money is your money. Yes, indeed, the government only gets money when they carve it out of your posterior. Okay, so let's be clear. Your money.
To be fair, okay, I'm going to do a little government speak translation for you. GMO or GNO, NGO, excuse me.
GMO is something in food I'm not supposed to eat, which is on a long list of things I'm not supposed to eat that I pay no attention to. Back to you.
NGO, non-governmental organization. It isn't necessarily a nonprofit. I mean, Lockheed is a non-governmental organization, and they are for-profit, and they get lots of money for us from a defense standpoint. So I don't want you to disparage those nonprofits that are legit out there as putting them into the same category as an NGO.
Scott, let me put it another way to you, though, and why I'm disparaging NGOs, and we'll continue along this talk track. I'd like you to open a company, all right? And here's the company that you're going to have to open. Scott, this company sells no product, okay? Absolutely no product, but it's going to be providing services as yet to be determined. But wait, there's more. In the services yet to be determined, we are not going to audit what those services are. And Scott, I tell you what, not only are we not going to audit what those services are, but for all the goodwill that you're doing by giving you all this money, we're going to be paying you somewhere between $250,000 to $500,000 a year. And wait, there's more. Scott, In addition, you get to hire all your friends and relatives to work for about a couple $100,000 a year. That's what these nonprofits have become.
Oh,
In-
hold it. You left out one other important factor, and that is don't forget all those campaign contributions to Democrats that come out of each of those people's pockets.
oh,
So, in
that's
effect, the NGO is laundering campaign funding that's really taxpayer money going into the campaigns.
very good point. And they also produce work that goes back, that's done by the unions, and it becomes this circle of money. Now, that is a simple way to put why Gavin Newsom,
Ding, ding,
Dan's
ding,
on
ding.
fire today, ding, 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 why Gavin Newsom can't tell us where 24 billion went to solve a problem we call the homeless in California. Now, I want to stress again, and I
That's
say
the
this
that's the
all,
homeless industrial
it's what we
complex.
call an industrial complex, but let's stress again a couple very important things. This is, we've lost track of this. I'm going to say this till the day I die, which every birthday gets closer. So try to remember this and record this. This is billions with a B. Most of you listening to the show, wait a minute, everybody listening to the show, or you wouldn't be listening, probably doesn't have $1 million worth of disposable income. 1,000 million is a billion. And wait, there's more. 1,000 billion is a trillion. And we toss these figures around like they're nothing. It's important to note that Gavin Newsom alone, just on homeless, because they don't have a Doge, because they practice the same accounting system that Elon Musk is ripping the top off of, we don't know where the money went. 24 billion with a B. And Dan, if you're watching the screen, watch that figure scroll across the bottom. It is unbelievable how much it is. Okay. It is
I'm sorry, I don't have that many commas in my bank account.
no one, and the state of California doesn't have that much common sense. And neither does a lot of the federal government. And this is another problem that I have boiling down to California. I did something very bad this morning, which I do occasionally. No, it wasn't early morning drinking. I'm over that. But guess what I did, Scott?
I give up. What?
I watched part of Good Morning America on ABC television. Okay.
Oh, you did that as a service to us so that
I
we don't
did
have
that
to
as a
watch it, right?
service to you. And for everyone out there thinking it doesn't take great sacrifice to be even on this podcast, you try it sometimes. Now, Good Morning America puts a couple people on. Oh, I just got fired from the federal government. I this, that, it's so horrible. And CBS, and I did watch 60 Minutes on Sunday, full disclosure, a bad habit I'm trying to get rid of. I'm planning
That's
on going.
61. That's 61 minutes.
Yes, I'm planning on going to the Betty Ford Center for network rehab soon. At the end, they put on this head of the National Archives, and they had an interview with her last year. They're being very careful what they say because Trump is suing them for 20 billion with a B dollars. And you look her up. Yep, exactly. Exactly. Sarah, I'm going to call out Sarah again. 38% of food produced goes to waste, but they take in a buck, and where does the money go? The money goes because we don't give it directly. What we're doing, I want to dwell on this, is we give it directly to people making too much money. This head of the archives is making a salary of about $450,000 a year for a government job, and there's millions of them, literally 2 million of them, and they're not all overpaid. But the biggest employer in the U.S. is the federal government. The biggest employer in California happens to be the state government. And that state government, just like a buck doesn't go directly to feeding people, doesn't really do much for our gross state product. When we talk about being the fifth biggest economy in the world, that is a bunch of malarkey. We're the fifth biggest gross economy in the world simply because all our stuff costs so much and we pump out money to overpay people that are employed by government, which didn't work out for Russia necessarily.
Hey, if you remember during COVID, the Employment Development Department, EDD, was responsible for doling out that money. And they don't know where almost $100 billion went. There's that much in fraud. I'm sorry, 100 billion was their total amount. The amount of fraud was 40 billion. And they have no way of tracking it. They were milked out of that. They were bilked out of that money. And they're just kind of like, oh, well, I mean, they're not even chasing it down. Give me a break.
But here's something we know where the money went to. And by the way, and please, liberals, if you're watching this show, don't take it as a literal, take it as a metaphor. We do know that about 135 billion has been spent to build a 1,500-foot sidewalk. Scott, that's your cue.
1,500-foot high-speed sidewalk.
Apparently, you can walk on it really fast. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have a train on it, and that's all we've built for $135 billion so far. You can watch the video. Is a 1,500-foot thing of concrete that even when the train gets running from nowhere to nowhere, which will eventually still be the train to nowhere, okay, it becomes a problem. But the metaphor, don't take this literally, it's probably the bullet train is probably going to get a bullet put in it tomorrow because our new Secretary of Transportation is doing a press conference, I believe it's tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Union Station in Los Angeles. He would do it at the bullet train, but transportation doesn't go there, which is kind of an oxymoron, I guess.
So you see on the screen, can you see it there? We've got that little section of concrete. This is from the High Speed Rail Authority's website.
Put it up. Can you let's see that? That, my friends, is what you've paid so far 135 billion for. Now, I will admit it's a really nice looking sidewalk. Okay. That is all we've spent so far. Now, if you want to go from one end of the sidewalk to the other, you won't be taking a train or a golf cart. You'll be walking. Yes,
because there's no rail. You remember Trump said this is a week and a half ago, but in Trump years, that's a long time. So he says he's going to do a big investigation into California's high-speed rail, and that's where we've got the press release that came from our Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, is going to hold a press conference on the high-speed rail for an official announcement by the U.S. Department of Transportation tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. at Union Station in Los Angeles. Should be a good show if you happen to be down there. Go down and catch Sean Duffy. Tell Newsom he's losing all his money. They're not going to get a dime, and they're going to probably try and get everything that they paid them back that they haven't spent yet.
So for everyone out there, I want you to get your arms around this. That there's a difference when Gavin Newsom gets up there and says, oh, we're the fifth largest economy. We're almost the fourth, whether you like it or not. Well, Gavin, we don't like it. That's partially because the federal government has pumped a lot of money into California. It's partially because stuff cost too damn much.
So this was all part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which really was a Green New Deal Fund the Wacko Act, and the high speed rail got a $200 billion chunk of that money.
It's funny, and I don't want to go too deep into the Inflation Reduction Act here tonight, but indeed the bullet train did get a chunk of that money. But since that same thing where Elon Musk was talking about a week ago in his press conference about how the government's main job isn't to get yelled at. Remember that? that's really, they don't want to be yelled at, right? So they don't annotate where stuff goes in the budget. But once, one of the things which hasn't been talked a lot about in the mainstream press is that once they started going into the ledgers, they also found stopped up money. All this infrastructure for people, and there's some good parts of, I'll call it the Inflation Reduction Act, like, yes, shocking but true, like rebuilding some roads, like providing internet in rural parts of Tennessee and Alabama. None of it had been done. None of it.
So the good infrastructure, actual improvements, hard improvements that we're going into debt, our children are going into debt, that hasn't been done. But we have lots of high-speed rail. Well,
But not Gavin Newsom, but the government was able to release money because that money which was appropriated by Congress. And we started off in our pregame, Scott, talking about how the Democrats are going to sue because Congress has done this and Congress has done that. Trump's going against it. Well, a lot of things that everybody agreed on was not getting done by the Biden administration, which goes back to what Gavin Newsom, that smirking face behind you, and there's nothing worse than seeing Gavin Newsom in my face. Okay, if you talk about, if you hear screaming from where I live at an undisclosed country tonight, that's much better. I'd much rather look at you, and you're not even that good looking, than Gavin himself. But the reality is this, okay?
Well, our hair's the same. All I have to do is add a little oil, don't you think?
Yeah, it might work. A slick,
darken it up a little, put some oil on it. Yeah, I could, he needs a little bit of a beard. Hey, you mentioned that government doesn't want to be yelled at. I think it needs a little bit more explanation. So if you're the Social Security guy and you're in charge of getting the Social Security checks out and you didn't get your check, Mike Netter, you're going to call up and go, "Where's my money? I've got to pay my rent. I'm eating dog food. Hurry up, give me my money." And you're going to yell at them, right? So rather than doing that, they give you your money, Mike Netter, but they also give it to literally millions of dead people because they are too afraid that they're going to cut somebody off who isn't dead, and therefore they'll get mad and get yelled at. So instead, they write checks worth millions, if not billions of dollars to dead people. Somebody's cashing those checks, and we're losing the money. You think the Social Security system's not solvent? Here's a reason why.
The same system, which doesn't want them to get yelled at, is also the people that yell the loudest, which, going back to like the 50 million we've talked about, I think, opening this show. Okay.
Wait a second, you mean like I'm getting a check from my dead father, and when that check stops coming, I yell louder than you would if you didn't get your check.
What I mean
is I need my check.
The donors and the unions yell pretty loud at Gavin Newsom in California. Small groups of people, and we're going to cover the story tonight.
Donors like PG&E, right?
The donors and the unions, which make a very loud banging with really a tiny drum, and we're going to get to that after Magdalena at 7, with a story that was in the LA Times that just blew my mind. Yell. And because they have access to yell directly at people like Gavin Newsom, the system itself does, to your point, doesn't want the checks and balances. They just don't. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Balances between what? State and federal? Between judicial and legislative and executive?
Judicial is almost designed to be yelling. Okay, it's designed for cases. Okay, it's the one place in America where parties yell back and forth, and we might not always agree with the decision. But I've said ever since I was a wee lad back in George Washington days that no matter who you elect, okay, the bureaucracy continues on. We used to think, oh, good, we've elected George Bush. He's a Republican. Oh, bad for our side. We've elected Obama. Oh, look, we've elected Clinton. Look, we've elected. But the bureaucracy or the muck around it has stayed the same. And that muck, which bureaucracy we now call the swamp, continues to operate on the fact that I'm getting paid. I don't want to lose my $300,000 a year job for shuffling paper. Forget it could be automated for a second, which is inefficient. So I want people to stay off my beep, which I'll say posterior. And if I'm an elected official, I don't want unions yelling at me because I don't want to stand at them, especially the public unions, because they control me and they're my donors. And I don't want the donors yelling at me. So the $50 million, and I want you to really think about that, Scott. Gavin Newsom and the state Democratic controlled legislature appropriated $50 million to fight Trump from the Department of Justice. Now, I want you to take a step back and think about that, Scott. Think about 50 million bucks. Really, over 4 years in the big picture, that's not a lot of money. If they're really going to bring a lot of court cases against Daddy, which is the federal government.
Well, I mean, is that going to be $50 million per year? Because they stuck it all in this year's budget.
It's $50 million. Now,
they're not going to. It's not going to end up $50 million a year.
Nope. Why did they? That $50 million, a figure big enough to sound dramatic to the general public, because I'd be happy to win a lotto ticket for $500, no less $50 million. I'm optimistic. Most of that $50 million is going to go, and everybody be aware out there, not to giving meals to people. Let me rephrase that. It is going to give meals to people, but it's not the poor. It's not the underprivileged, which, by the way, is about 40% of California as we rate it. It's going to be meals.
We're all underprivileged. Is that what you're telling us?
Oh, actually, we are. California has the highest percentage of people below the poverty level because the state's so expensive to live in. But those meals that we're paying for are meals at the French Laundry, so to speak, because they're going to outside counsel, which, when you look at it, are donors to Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta, those same firms. This is basically a big posterior way to give back money to the people that are circularly washing hands. It will do virtually nothing for even illegal immigrants, which I'm like, we got to move them out anyway, but let's put that down.
So let me get this right. The trial attorneys that always support Democrats are going to be the biggest recipients of this 50 mil.
Yep. Not even trial attorneys, outside firms. You've got to understand that when the Department of Justice in California does these lawsuits, we have a budget that's approved every year for the California Department of Justice. Fair enough? That's supposed to cover most normal things. That budget for the Department of Justice, because I looked it up and researched it when Eric Early ran for Attorney General, is about $1 billion a year. That's what runs Rob Bonta's department, about $1 billion. They add the extra $50 million by appropriation because it goes to outside counsel. This is shocking to you, Scott. Are you ready?
Uh-oh.
Those outside attorney firms are picked, like much of Gavin, please bring Doge to California. With no bid, no competitive bidding, no nothing except they're friends of Gavin Newsom. I'm going to bring in Magdalena real quick and get our San Francisco segment on the air. We're going to do her by phone. And then I want to get to some other interesting news that happened this week.
Magdalena, are you there? Hello.
All right. Magdalena, how you doing tonight? Yeah, you got to speak up. Go ahead. I can hear you now. Magdalena,
Okay.
Give us a quick San Francisco report here because you're squawky as we're doing. We can hear you now. Can you hear Magdalena?
Yes, I see you on Facebook.
Oh,
You're all over the place.
Yes, we are all over the place. Magdalena is kind of our San Francisco source. Full disclosure, she's an independent, but she's been with us since the recall. Magdalena, is there any sense San Francisco, we talk about this, you elected a pair of jeans to be mayor there. Well, it was a moderate pair of jeans, not a liberal pair of jeans with rips and holes in it. Is the attitude changing up there in San Francisco?
Well, you see, the problem is that Daniel Laurie and Gavin Newsom are in cahoots with each other. So I don't know much is going to really change. But people have been fooled because they didn't want London Breed, but people didn't realize that Daniel Laurie was in Gavin Newsom's pocket. So we had a weekend here that was pretty good. They had the All-Star game and the Valentine's Day, and they had other stuff going on in the Chinese New Year break. But we were losing businesses. People are leaving. Businesses are still closing. There ain't much change going on.
Yeah, there's a lot, and that's another part that's kind of fallen out of the news. We reported on the conservative side. By the way, we were talking about before, as you heard us, California, we're the fifth largest economy. Well, San Francisco, to say they're sinking is an understatement because San Francisco, Oakland, and much of the Bay Area is losing their businesses, right?
Yes, and not only that, as you know, you mentioned it on your show about Gavin Newsom doing that $24 billion of Newsom funds. I think it's now up to $60 billion. And also San Francisco, there was $800 million not accounted for under London Breed that was supposed to go to the homeless programs.
Well, that's a great point, Scott. We need to talk about that too, because these individual cities, San Jose, San Francisco, have no accountability. The government's been handing over our money with nothing to go. Magdalena, it's great to have on. We're going to do a practice with you. You get hooked up on Restream next week. Tell us again your radio, where to find you, and where to repost our shows. And I know I owe you a couple.
Well, you know what? That's true. KPSF, Digital Broadcasting Radio, coming at you from San Francisco and beyond.
That's right. So for everybody out there, Magdalena is also helping push our show out to the college community, which are people we have to get in. And that's another important, and bless you for the work you do. Magdalena, we'll be talking to you next week, or if not before.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
So it's interesting. Go ahead.
I was just say one of the things, as you brought up, the college age kids, they're turning conservative. They're growing up and seeing all the financial hardships that were brought on by the Biden administration and before that Obama, and they're leaning more conservative. So you have kind of this middle of the road people that haven't gotten their act together. I'll call them the millennials, which are kind of split. But the new younger people they see the prices, they see what's going on, they think it's crazy, and they're not growing up Democrats. How they say, don't let friends vote Democrat. And these guys are turning around. So there's hope for the future. I just want to bring that out to everybody.
Well, not only hope for the future, let's be logical here, okay? And I put out in a post today, we have to understand, and again, for the older generation out there, and I've said this many a time, 33% of all Californians are 55 and older. We make up 50% now of the vote. And in the next 10 or 15 years, okay, as California is aging more rapidly, not just because Scott and I are aging ourselves, it's because young people in general, well, we're part of the problem, and we can't stop that. But the reality is people, the productive people, which are the younger people, the productive younger people, why would they stay in California? They can
No, they're not. They're leaving.
They're leaving.
Leaving some of the best weather on the planet because the politics, the cost of living. I was talking to somebody today from another state, and their electric bill is around $250 a month, but there it's only $80 a month, and that's running the AC 24/7. So, why is it that the electric bill is a third of what it is here? Is solar more expensive? Yes. Is wind more expensive? Yes. All in the light or in the name of green energy and saving the planet and the whole climate change hoax, our electric bills, our utility bills are 3 times what they are in other states.
Scott, you don't think it could have anything to do with the utility companies and the Electrical Workers Union? And we'll be getting an article out on that on Nutter News and maybe with some other friends of mine in journalism. Electrical Union, Union of Electrical Brotherhood or whatever they are, who works for the utility companies, being the largest donors to Gavin Newsom. And for everyone out there, and look, I grew up not, and Scott, I think you, well, I don't know that you ever grew up, but let's assume you got older, right? When you were younger, okay, we didn't really worry about things like who was on the board of the PUC. Didn't care, didn't know.
Didn't even know there was a PUC, whatever that is.
14 members of the PUC. Utility companies are the big, let's just hit with some facts here.
So Public Utilities Commission, they are the government's regulation of private investor-owned utilities. 14 members. Tell us about the 14 members. How many
14
who
members.
appoints them?
10 members are picked by Gavin Newsom, and the other 4 members are picked by the Democratic legislature under the influence of Gavin Newsom. So this entire board, and hold on, wait, there's more. Again, these jobs pay $250,000 to $400,000 a year for 5-year staggered terms. Good work if you can get it.
So this is to be a PUC member. You
No, to
get
be a
paid that
PUC
much?
commissioner. Oh yeah, it pays really well, dude. And it's a 5-year guaranteed job. So if you didn't like my first job, where you were making $500,000 a year and didn't feel like working with the homeless, I got another job for you. And many of these people are donors where you can make $250,000 to $400,000 a year, get free travel up and down the state, reimbursements, a nice office. And by the way, let me also mention something else. The job is guaranteed for 5 years and nobody has to elect you. So it's funny when you hear the Democrats bitch about Elon Musk. Let's talk about these commissions. And wait, there's more. The biggest donors to Gavin Newsom again.
Wait a second. Well, let me guess. Utility companies who have to deal with the PUC.
And union workers who get more work and higher wages by Gavin Newsom creating things like bullet trains. And
Ding, 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 ding.
Yep, ding, ding. Dan put
Who
dollars
win the prize?
side of the screen. And let me put this in perspective for you. There's my ding, ding, ding. And that ding, 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 ding is really ah. And that sound that you hear is when you get your utility bill every month. In perspective to you. You go to the gas station and you're shocked much of the time because you notice gas has gone up from $3.75 to whatever the hell it is now, $5.38 a gallon, and you notice it goes up and you scream because you watch the thing spin and see it costs $75 to fill up your tank. I've said this before. If you're lucky. I've said this before. I'm going to say this again. The scream that comes out of your household, somewhere between the 3rd and the 14th of the month, you look at the total, Scott, of your utility bill. What I want you to look at is your price per kilowatt hour. So we talk about gas being 150% higher than most
other states. Right.
The average watt price per kilowatt hour in the United States for 48 states, minus California and Hawaii, is 17 cents per kilowatt hour. That is your price per gallon of gas for electricity. In California, it's about between 33 and 37 cents. And it's going up with a bullet. And by the way,
hey, the legislature added to that, right? They added a utility tax that we're all paying now, whether we like it or not.
They had a
Because evidently
utility
they
tax,
didn't
a
think we
gas
were
tax,
paying them.
which goes back a lot to the theme of tonight's show. California cannot go bankrupt. You know that, right, Scott?
No Chapter 9 allowed for the state of California or any state.
Chapter 9, Chapter 11, Chapter 7, Chapter anything, a state cannot go bankrupt.
Hey, I'm from Orange County. We were the largest municipal bankruptcy back when, and it was a
That's
Chapter
right.
9.
Talk about that. Why did Orange County go bankrupt about 25 years ago?
They went bankrupt because we had a treasurer that would borrow money, invest the borrowed money, and then borrow more money and invest the borrowed money. He was tripled down, and he banked on the interest rates going up, going down, and they went up instead. So they lost it all.
He invested in something called derivatives, but in simple terms, he made bad decisions. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, he made bad decisions. So let's go into some of those bad decisions, not just of the bankruptcy, but we got the $25 or the $50 million Trump-proof California. Some of the things that are happening in there are basically anything that Newsom doesn't like what Trump's doing. He's going to use that money to go after Trump. One of the things is the sanctuary state. Obviously, Trump's got a mandate to get rid of all the illegal aliens that are in our country. He's going to ship them out, and he's getting Canada and Mexico to help. So California passed a law called SB 54. I was actually on the city council at the time, and we actually said, well, we're going to be a non-sanctuary city amongst the whole sanctuary state. But there's limits. We had to limit what our police department, our local police department, can do. Your sheriff's department. I just talked to our county sheriff the other day, and he was telling me that, hey, the sanctuary.
Were you pulled over, or was this a arranged conversation?
We won't go there.
Okay.
So SB 54 basically says that you're not allowed to use state resources, city resources, government resources to help or assist the federal government in getting, identifying illegal aliens or detaining them for the federal government. So what would be easy to do for the sheriff, as an example, because he's the one that runs the county prison. So the county jail, you got a illegal alien that's being released because his time's over, right? Normally, in a normal state, you'd sit there and call up the feds and go, hey, this guy is an illegal alien. We're releasing him at 2:00 on Tuesday. And they would just be sitting out there with a van, and they'd come out, and they know the guy's not armed because he just came out of the jail, and he would walk out, and they would arrest him, and they would deport him. Now, Gavin Newsom outlaws, and that sheriff can't call up the feds and say, hey, we're releasing this guy. So instead, they have to let him go out into the community. And when they go out into the community, now they're tracking this guy. They know that he's been released because they're tracking him. And they go into the neighborhood, and now he may be having a Super Bowl party with all of his illegal friends. And they come to arrest that illegal criminal.
Even if there's not a football game on. I mean, what the heck?
Fireworks are going, and they sit there and they check everybody out, and everybody there is illegal. And so they ship every single one of them out. Even though some of them, they may not be illegal criminals, they're still in the country illegally. So they are, in effect, criminals. And they deport them all. And if there's a conflict, if the guy's he's a criminal, if he's armed, if he's done other things, now Newsom is putting in jeopardy the neighbors and everybody else that's around, because what happens if there ends up being a gunfight as the feds come to arrest this guy? Certainly that's not what the feds want, but if the bad guys initiate a gunfight because they don't want to be deported, innocent people may get hurt. Well, that's on Newsom. That's on the legislature. That's on the state of California for having SB 54. And our local sheriff cannot help and prevent that from happening. So he's taking what would normally have been a smooth, let's call it incident-free situation of arresting them as they're released from the jail. Now he's basically inviting the feds to come into the neighborhood, and you're putting the neighbors and everybody else at risk, because you never know what the guy's going to do, whether he's going to create a problem or defend himself or whatever. And Newsom's got to own up to this stuff. And I don't care if he's got 20 attorneys out there. The feds are going to go after him. That's the law. And the feds are coming. Tom Homan has already made that statement. He doesn't care about sanctuary cities. Now, the interesting thing is, I think you're going to see not only does the Fed, does the sanctuary state law put the feds in the neighborhood and create risks, but I think you're going to find Trump sitting there saying, you know what, we're not going to give any money. And this is already there, right? We're not going to give any money to the Department of Justice to any of these states unless they assist us in getting illegals off the street. And California's already said that's not going to happen. They've got a law that prevents it. So what are they going to do? Are they going to give up the funding? No, they're going to stick $50 million worth of attorneys and stick them on Trump and try and get the law changed or his executive order changed. Forget the fact that he's got a mandate. Forget the fact that the Congress says round these guys up. This is the law. They don't like the way that Trump's doing it, and they don't like the fact that he's withholding other money for it, so they're going to sue. There's already 70 lawsuits against the Trump administration, all by blue states. Now, what's wrong with this picture?
Well, what's even more wrong with this picture, what they don't understand, let's jump a little bit of this to CIF sports before we rotate back to.
No, that's a good point. That's another good item. The DEI mandate that he's put out says basically, we're going to protect women. Men are not going to be allowed to be on women's sports. And
two genders.
Only two. They actually came out. They had the balls to come out and define those two genders.
Well, half of them did.
So unlike the Supreme Court justice that couldn't tell you what a woman was, Trump has basically said, well, we're defining a woman this way and a man this way, and that's it. There's no discussion. But to your point, in order to protect our girls, from men on being on the girls' teams or from men being in the girls' locker rooms and other private spaces, he wants to withhold money from those organizations. But the state law says, for instance, schools have to, through the CIF and others organizations, they have to allow men on the girls' teams, and they have to allow men to use the girls' locker rooms. So the schools are going to have to give up all their federal funding.
Well, let's talk something else there. There's something that probably will be eliminated soon called the Department of Education, but I was close, okay? That'll probably eliminate it at the federal level. And in California, as you may know, and there's another, actually, I believe it's Thursday night, there is another school board proposing to get rid of this. Let's not tell the parents that Johnny wants to be Jane, because why should the parent get involved, right? That's another area where the school districts will have their federal funding yanked. And before any of you out there, and please, everyone out there, and I neglected to mention, I want you to go to our YouTube channel, which is we call Outraged, okay? And I want you to spread this to the liberals so they get ticked off. Subscribe. Try to get us kicked off YouTube. I would consider it a badge of honor, okay? Because spread the word that California cannot survive without federal funding. We are only the fifth biggest economy because that's a gross, not a net economy. I really want to drive this home, okay? We cannot stand on our own. Let's get something else that Gavin Newsom is doing here, Scott, and that Gavin Newsom has about effectively a year and a half, little under 2 years left in office, okay? So, like any good scammer, before Doge comes to town, to quote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, who are those guys?
Who are those guys?
Who are those guys? Okay, which is going to be Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom is raiding our fund. Can I hit you with a couple small trivia facts you might find rather interesting? When Gavin Newsom came into office, the state budget was about 197 billion with a B. Please.
And this was in
6 years ago.
January.
6 years.
January of 2019.
2019, 6 years ago. Okay. Since then, Gavin Newsom, with help from the Democratic legislature, has expanded our budget to over $300 billion. Now,
In only 5 short years, we sit there and see a 50% increase.
now think
Okay,
about it.
sounds very bad.
I know most of you in Los Angeles are going to look around and say, well, hey, my life's a lot better. Okay, not. Okay. Homeless are riddling the streets. Karen Bass, we're going to have to do a whole show on Karen Bass. We may not even get to her tonight. But the reality is the state budget has increased by over $100 billion. Now, 2 years ago, the state budget did indeed have an alleged surplus of $70 billion with what's called a rainy day fund, which in simple terms is a savings account. We, the people, voted in it. It's not a bad idea. Most states have it, ups and downs in budget years, especially in California. That's 70 or 80 billion dollars. Gavin Newsom has now spent down, by the time we're through with this budget year, to about 20 billion. Just kind of enough to cover his budget shortfall if he's lucky.
Yeah.
Through the next budget year out of office. And yes, we do dare you, thank Dan, go to YouTube, follow us, subscribe, just to tick Google and the liberals off. That's why we traditionally haven't had a YouTube channel. But Google, I challenge you. I really do. You throw me off as a badge of honor, okay? We're on all social media. We record the shows. We put them up. But you need to spread the word because, in fact, you know what's funny, Scott? I did a grok on my, which you could do. Anybody could do it for your X account. It will analyze your X account for me. And it came up with one fact was shocking. You hate Gavin Newsom. Hey, I took artificial intelligence for that. But it also said...
it probably is artificial, but yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. We've noticed you speckled your X account with facts. And so everyone out there, these are facts we're presenting you with tonight. The savings budget of California is whittling down to almost nothing. Gavin overspends. Scott, it's a spending problem, right?
Yes, it's not a revenue problem; it's a spending problem. We have more revenue today in the state of California than we've ever had in history.
But we're taxed to death. And a good example, and I want to spend a couple minutes here in the end on focusing on LA.
Yeah, we already have a great example in LA of how they're not taking care of the business of the state. They cannot run the state. We have fires that they didn't do, enough fuel modification, enough preparation for, and that's one of the basic things to keep us busy. And instead, what do they do?
Nothing. Adam Carolla put out a video about a week ago, and there's a lot of them like this. It was on his show, I should say. Up and down the Pacific Palisades, up and down Malibu. There's still burnt out cars left a month after the fire. The government of Los Angeles has done nothing. Alex Michelson, who's a fine reporter and a buddy of mine, full disclosure, did a great interview with Bass.
Did you say fine reporter in the same sentence?
He's okay. He's okay. He's not too bad. He interviews everybody. He interviewed Bass. Bass was horrible in the interview. Watch it. I retweeted it on my X feed. Her answers are nothing. She took 11 agencies, and she's proud to say, not why do we have 11 agencies, but put them under one roof so you could drive down and get hung up by 11 bureaucracies in the same building instead of wasting your overpriced gas.
Now, wait a second. You're talking about the development project process, right? With
It's
permits.
all under one roof. She's very proud of that. It's still 11 desks you have to go to. Why aren't they putting them in even the same neighborhood where the houses burned down? Because I don't know about you, dude. I didn't build my house. I'm not an architect like you. I don't know how to find the development agencies. But hold on. Hold on. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And do you know why, Scott?
Why, Mike?
This week, the City Council of Los Angeles, which is approximately, I'm going to say, close to $500 million deficit this year, that had half the city burned down, metaphorically but close, with no leadership, that has an Olympics coming up that I don't know how we're going to be prepared for, that has homelessness littering the streets, was thinking about retaking up a measure that those expletive-deleted bosses at fast food restaurants dare to not give the schedules to their $20 hour overpaid, now, sorry, I'm going to say it, employees 2 weeks ahead of time. And they're considering it picking back up. You know why, Scott?
Didn't they go on strike over this? Didn't they
Oh,
do
they
a daily
wanna strike over
protest?
minimum wage. Because the LA Times stated there was a protest. Hold on. There are approximately 50,000 fast food workers in Los Angeles County, I'm going to say, maybe in the city. That strike, which was staged by the SEIU, are you ready? Had 60 people. No, not 600. No, not 6,000. Had 60 people. LA Times, why do you give that a breath of air by reporting on it instead of spending your time asking why are there still burned out carcasses of cars sitting a month after the fire? Why are there still 11 agencies that someone has to drive to just to even begin a rebuilding process? And why is LA in so much debt that we wouldn't qualify for an SBA loan if we were a successful restaurant, which we're not? Scott, these are the questions which need to be asked, and they're not being asked. Wouldn't you agree?
You would think so, right? They can't do the basic role of government of fire safety and keeping us safe. And instead, they're worried about their one-stop shop that shouldn't be there in the first place because we wouldn't need it if they'd have done their job up front. And that's what they're touting. It's beyond belief. It's hard to overestimate that.
We're going to roll this down to the end here. And before I give my final blast, because I do have yet another gig after this, Scott, do you want to go on at all?
No, we'll go back next week.
Give us your final words here tonight, and then I'm going to give you my final blast.
So the bottom line is Trump is doing what he said he was going to do, what he was given a mandate to do. And you have people like Newsom and amongst other Democrats that object to it very strongly, and they're going to do anything and everything they can to do it. And they're using our taxpayer dollars to file lawsuits in friendly jurisdictions to try and stop Trump. And that's a violation of separation of powers. You cannot have the judiciary saying, oh, Mr. Executive Branch, which is only Mr. Trump, you can't audit your own people. You can't decide who to hire, who to fire. You can't do any of these things. It is wrong. And it's going to backfire on them. They're out there defending the waste that DOJ is uncovering in the various different departments of government. And they're out there saying, no, we want billions of dollars to go to my aunt or my uncle or my buddy in the union because we don't care about the taxpayers. We just want our cut. I think it's going to end, and it's going to end badly for Newsom and the other Democrats.
And it's time, everybody, that you understand. Watch that Karen Bass interview with Alex Michelson. We lack leadership, and we, the people of California, through Rebuild California, go to rebuildcalifornia.com. Come to our show next week at California Free Radio. Follow us on YouTube at Outraged. Follow Scott. We not only want our money back, as one viewer says, we want leadership. And it's time for a showdown, isn't it? It's time for a showdown. And it's time we, the people, stood up and led California ourselves, because apparently the Democratic politicians, by their own admission, are not equipped to do it. We're California Free Radio. I'm going to turn this on-air sign off, and we'll be back next week with more blasts for you. Thank you, and
California Free Radio. We're behind the blue curtain, and we're bringing freedom to California. Come back next week, same time, 6:30, Wednesday.